So we have the full spoilers for chapter 27 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, and Boruto apparently has a new technique. We also have some new info as it pertains to Omnipotence and why Sarada isn't affected, along with a tiny reveal in relation to the Ten Tails. So we have a lot to discuss, but of course, let's start from the top. So the person on the cover is Inojin and the title is Betting One's Life, though of course that can change once the chapter comes out. Now the side text says, having their immunity to charm discovered, Sarada and the others are caught off guard. How they handle Daemon's sudden attack. And this of course is then addressed on page 2 because he then simply lets go of them. And Sarada, by the way, at this point no longer has her Mangekyo active. So apparently Sarada didn't think she could do anything with her Mangekyo to stop Daemon and she just deactivated it. Now Daemon then says, "You understand now, right? I can dispose of you guys on a whim. Before you even notice, you're dead." Sarada then says, "You're not gonna kill us?" That's when Eida leans over and says, "No matter how you think of it, it is strange. Why are the two of you who are not Otsutsuki unaffected by Omnipotence? Is it because you've had your heart stolen by Boruto, who's an Otsutsuki? No, that isn't the whole of it. There's plenty of girls in the village who have their hearts in a flutter over those two," which is very interesting. But anyway, she goes on to say, if the only reason you can dodge the effects of Omnipotence is because of that, then it's strange that there aren't other girls who are the same. Even still, the two of you remain unaffected. There's only one reason I can think of. I must have made an exception myself for the two of you. Now this is very funny because obviously Ikimoto is on Twitter, on X, reading those theories because he mentions the most popular one, that the reason why they weren't affected was because they were in love with Boruto, who's an Otsutsuki. Now of course you could say that maybe he even thought of that himself, but yeah, this was a very popular fan theory and he addresses that directly here to say that nope, that is not the case, and here's the reason why, because there are the girls that are in love with Boruto and Kawaki. And I do find it interesting because she says the two of them, and I didn't know that Kawaki has that lore, but yeah, I guess that's very interesting to know. But yeah, Eida goes on to say, of course, that was subconsciously done. Omnipotence just made it a reality. And to be honest, I thought this was done when she was heading towards the village and she overheard or saw Sarada and Sumire defending her to Shikamaru and the others. I thought that was when she made an exception for them subconsciously, but she goes on to reference this scene with them in the bed together talking, and Sarada saying that they should be normal friends, implying that that is when she made an exception. And it kind of makes sense because Sarada initially said that the power felt overwhelming. It's as if she was feeling the effects of Omnipotence to some extent, but then it gradually faded. So it seems that they were affected initially, but they were more so resistant, similar to Shikamaru. But it could also be the case that it was done from the time she was heading towards the village, and that is why they had that level of resistance in the first place. Who knows? Also, Eida then goes on to pretty much say what I said in the prior video, that she always wanted this to be the case, wanted real human relationships and wanted real friends that aren't affected, which is why she's not going to harm them, and she notes this here. And then goes on to say, after all this time, I don't think either of you have the intention to harm me. And then goes on to say something pretty sad but also not at the same time, but she goes on to say that if they were the ones to kill her, then it wouldn't be that bad. Now of course I'm not going to show the panels because of copyright, but I can tell you what happens because Sarada then grabs onto Sumire's hand and rushes over to Eida and hugs her. Sarada then goes on to say that I've never heard of such a thing, a friendship where you'd risk your life, which is also kind of interesting given, Team 7. But anyways, maybe this is a bad translation. She also says that this is just her way of showing resolve. You could even call it a token of friendship. Eida then says that's a bold way to show it, don't you think, Sarada-chan? Sumire also says, I don't hate it, Being friends would risk their lives for each other. It's insanely exciting, isn't it? Eida then replied saying, once again, nice to meet you, my important friends. And then you have Daemon smiling in the background because finally his sister has real friends that she doesn't have to compel. which is awesome. So I love this entire interaction. Really, truly. It was pretty good. Now we then switch over to Kashin Koji and Inojin, the Boruto squad, etc. And Kashin Koji says that Mamushi's ability is to split apart or splits, or at least that is one of his powers. There is almost no limit to his numbers. He can split apart into several persons. Boruto then says, "Is it like shadow clones?" Koji replies saying no, it's completely different. The biggest difference is all of the parts are the true real body. Also, his chakra isn't split. There's no decline in his power or his physical strength, which by the way validates my video on why Naruto's shadow clones made him weaker, but that's a topic for another day, maybe on stream. But yeah, Shikamaru goes on to clarify if he's making multiple clones of himself at full strength, and says that it's kinda ridiculous. Koji then says that he does have a weakness. The more he increases his numbers, the more his intelligence falls, and sharply as well. In addition, his pain threshold reduces and his movements become simplified. That is the opening we should try to take advantage of. Shikamaru then says, so in other words, you're saying that the optimal solution is to let him multiply until he starts acting like a fool, and then we do away with him and all his parts at once. Koji says, exactly. There's just one more important thing to note. Make sure to crush both of his eyes. A body that has lost both eyes will become unable to split. But be cautious. By reducing his numbers, his intelligence decline will recover. So pretty much, they need to kill all of the clones at once, because if they kill each clone one by one, then the ones that remain will slowly regain their intelligence and also become more tolerant to pain. So he recovers his original fortitude per se. And what's most important, they have to destroy his renegades, because that's apparently where the power lies, I assume. Also, Koji tells them to aim for about 20 to 40 clones, because he'll become easier to handle. It'll be like fighting an animal. Then you can round them all up and take them out in one blow. So, get them in one circle and then use a massive Rasengan, GG's. It's all good. Also, Shikamaru goes on to ask a very important question, which is, what if he leaves one of his clones behind at the hideout? Even if they get rid of all of the parts in the village, doesn't that mean that we fail to exterminate him? Which, is very true. Koji then says there's no need to worry about that. His separate parts have a property that causes them to swarm. So even if he plans ahead and decides to leave one part on standby, it should instinctively flock towards where the majority are gathered. And Shikamaru says that makes sense, and it adds to the fact that he's become even more foolish. Now Inojin then chips in and says, that being said, why is there a need to fight in Konoha? If we know he's going to appear there, shouldn't we at least try to intercept him? And Koji brings up a very interesting point. He says that the main reason for choosing Konoha as a battleground is to prevent Jura's intervention. Jura's goal is Boruto and Himawari. If they move, Jura will move. But if the battlefield is in Konoha, he won't appear. And of course, Inojin wants to know why, so Shikamaru tells him, for some reason it seems as though he has taken a liking to Konoha. He makes frequent visits to the bookstores and the sweet shops. He's sighted there sometimes. And that's when you get the original spoiler panel where Jura is sitting there drinking some tea and eating some sort of sweet. Koji then notes that Jura has deemed fighting in Konoha unacceptable. Mamushi understands that as well. It's best to not incur the wrath of one's superior. He'll be careful not to cause unwarranted destruction to the village. And Boruto goes on to ask Koji if that still remains true even if he becomes an idiot, because of course, if he's going to divide, he's going to become less intelligent. So will he be smart enough to avoid crossing Jura, even in that state? And Koji says, yeah, it's an instinct. No matter how low his intelligence drops, his fear of Jura will never disappear. At the same time, neither will his goal of devouring Eida. That is why the ideal option is challenging Mamushi in a solo fight in Konoha. So I guess we can assume that the reason why Mamushi hasn't attacked us yet is because of that very reason, because Jura doesn't want any unnecessary fighting or destruction to the village. But we'll see what happens. Now Koji then says to Inojin that he's going to have him master a new jutsu. It's a new technique that's a superior version to mind-body transmission. That's why I brought you here. Inojin says, a new jutsu? Koji then goes on to say that Mamushi is expected to appear in the village in about a week. No, there's also a chance it might be sooner. In any case, there is no time. Master that jutsu within 2 days at least. Inojin says, 2 days? Wait, hold on. I don't even know what kind of jutsu it is. Koji then says, you should be able to do it. After all, it's a jutsu you came up with yourself to avenge Himawari. Of course, it's a future we must avoid. The theory and skills you gain there are highly valuable in and of themselves. I will teach them to you. Inojin then says, I don't need 2 days. I'll master it in a single day. So yeah, as I predicted in the prior video, Koji's prescience is unreliable, and it could be the case that Mamushi shows up even before the week period, and that is exactly what is apparently happening here. And also, based on Koji using the word avenge, it seems like Himawari dies in one of those possible futures. So yeah, Himawari isn't Jura level. I'm sorry to tell you guys, that isn't a thing. Now then skip over to Kawaki speaking to Amado. Kawaki says, did you grasp anything? And also, just to clarify what they're referring to, they're reviewing the footage of Kawaki's fight with Jura. So Kawaki apparently knows that Amado is watching things through his eyes. So yeah, keep that in mind. Oh, and by the way, they're showing this scene where Jura produces the roots to block Kawaki's energy blast. So Amado looks at this and says, the tree that he produces, it's likely safe to assume it is the same god tree as his own. Not only does it heal their wounds, it functions as a powerful weapon and an impenetrable shield. Kawaki then says, so what? You sound like you're saying it has no weaknesses. Amado then says, far from having a weakness, it's to the point I'm starting to think that it might be immortal. Kawaki then says, so it's impossible to bring him down completely. I definitely felt that kind of response. We need more power. Amado then says, Kawaki, I won't say anything bad, but as far as this goes, and then Kawaki just grabs him mid-sentence and says, want me to crush your throat? Quit running your mouth and just do what you were told, for the sake of your daughter, if you want my corporation. Amado then says that your body's telling you that you can't take anymore. This is an issue even before fighting him. You'll only destroy yourself. Kawaki then says, don't make me repeat myself. Granting your wish only comes after I wipe out every last enemy. You want to see your daughter, don't you? Then man up already. Are you going to kill the enemies, or will I die before that? There's no choice but to take this gamble. Now then switch over to Konohamaru being interrogated by Lord Kobu, and I'm not gonna go through every piece of dialogue because you guys can just read that when the chapter comes out. But in summary, he's pretty much questioning him about this situation with Boruto, and Konohamaru is saying that, hey, you know, I wasn't the one who did anything, but I do feel as if Boruto is helping us. And Kubo has this internal dialogue where he's saying that Konohamaru seems a bit too dumb to be the guy that helped Boruto, so it's probably somebody else. And then Shikamaru chimes in using Inojin's jutsu and tells Shikamaru that he's the one who let Boruto escape and tells him about the plan with Mitsuki and all that stuff. He then tells him to lend him his strength or to become one of their posse, and that's where we leave that conversation. Now then switch back to Eida and Sarada and Sumire, and Sumire gets a buzz, apparently maybe a pager, and she gets up and starts to walk away, telling them that she has to do something back in the lab. And Sarada says, well, I should get going too, but then Eida jumps on her and starts to hug her and squeeze her cheek against her cheek and says, you're not getting away, Sarada-chan. We're not done talking yet. Sarada then says, Sumire, help me. And Sumire says, see you later, Sarada, have fun. And she leaves. Now Sumire then appears on a roof-like structure. It seems to be the same house that Boruto stayed in, I'm not sure. And Mitsuki's off in the distance and seemingly notices Boruto's chakra. He then pulls out his sword and says, Uchiha-style sword technique, blade morph. Constantly wraps chakra around the blade to enhance sharpness and prevent chipping. But for just a moment I lost focus, and this is what happened. The sword cracked, or chipped. Either one, it's the same thing. Boruto then says, sorry class rep, I want this fixed within a week. Take a look at it. He then also gives her this scroll and she pulls it out and starts to read it and says, this technique is... And Boruto replies saying, yeah, as of now it's a technique that doesn't exist in this world as yet. It lies at the end of the research you're currently conducting. Eventually you'll invent it yourself. I can't tell you anything more specific than that. Will you do it? Sumire then says if I were to fix it using this technique, I think it would essentially become an entirely different thing. Are you really okay with that? Boruto then says, stronger blade? Sure, even my master shouldn't complain, you know? Sumire then says, alright, got it. But there's one thing, there's a problem. Boruto then says, what? And Sumire then says, I don't like being called class rep. Call me Sumire. And Boruto kinda softens his face and she runs away smiling. So yeah, I assume that this new technique is gonna be what prevents Kawaki from shrinking Boruto's sword when they fight, which is what everyone wanted to know. Like, why wouldn't Kawaki just shrink the sword? Well, I guess this new technique is probably gonna be why, and it's probably gonna be something that negates jutsus or negates chakra or something, which prevents Kawaki from applying his jutsu onto it. Who knows, I could be wrong, but I guess we'll see. Now it then switches to several days later. Mamushi is now on the walls of Konoha. He goes on to say that with this, I wonder where they're hiding. Big sis Eida too. He then tells his clones to make sure they're hiding their chakra presence properly, so they can't sense you. And that's where the chapter ends. So yeah, a lot happened in this chapter and I skipped out a lot as well, but of course when the full chapter comes out, I'm gonna do a full review and then we can go in detail on every single theory and happenings that took place in this chapter, as per usual. But yeah, if you guys like the spoilers, if you guys like the chapter where it's going, if you guys like the video, drop a like and subscribe if you're new, and also comment as well so you can get the juices flowing with this algorithm. But yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.